Okay. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Welcome everyone for another weekly Quranic wisdom study. We're continuing to read from Imam Nursi's long treatise, 25th word, which is about the eloquence of the Quran. And we've been reading for a while, but we're still, you know, uh, in the beginning, relatively speaking, and we are encountering different verses from different parts of the world, different parts of the Quran, and getting a taste of as people who are not in any way expert in Arabic, but we're still getting a taste of the eloquence in terms of especially its meaning. This passage we have been reading, this section we have been reading, has been about miraculous conciseness of the Quran and the way in which the Quran expresses really profound truths in very short condensed form, and Imam Nursi is claiming that that is also a facet of Quran's miraculousness. Um, last last session, by the way, I wanted to mention that we typically take a break in the middle of in the middle of summer. So we are planning to pause the halakas um, maybe in 4 or 5 weeks. Uh, that will take us to mid-June. Sister Sarah would like to still arrange a venue through which we can be in touch, perhaps not weekly, but perhaps some other regular ways of connecting still. So she's um, Jazakallah khair, she's thinking and she's going to be organizing hopefully something. But for now, let us cherish the remaining 5 weekly halakas that we have before we take a pause for the summer. So last week we talked about Tawheed, and in this one verse in Surah Rum, Surah 30, verse 22, how it gave us a peek view into two ends of a silsila, of a chain, and then with that, it gave us a way of connecting the two mentally or spiritually. So it doesn't mention all the silsilas, all the sequence, but beginning and the end of the sequence is given so that uh, it's very in a concise way. It's talking about how the creator of the one the larger macro things is also the creator of the micro small things, because we miss, as Dr. Yamina said last time, as Imam Nursi always highlights, we miss in everyday life, we forget about the creator, our Sanya, the maker, because we are familiar with things. We see them, even something as amazing as spring can start, things blossom. We can, because we're familiar with it, we can overlook the signs of God around us. And then the other thing that can be distracting is details and diversity. It, things being a sign sometimes is, clear in the larger patterns. But then when things get, detailed and detail of the detail, it's the question becomes, can I see the signs of God here as well? Because there is the potential to be distracted and to think that somehow the details, the particularities, the uniqueness, the things that don't fit a pattern, somehow they are not intended. But in reality, the one who makes the details to your eyes, to our eyelashes, must be the one who is also uh, making the galaxies exist and orbit. So we need both for Tawheed. That was one thing. We did spend some time with 6 verses. Imam Nursi has mentioned those 6 verses. that start وَمِنْ آيَاتِهِ وَمِنْ آيَاتِهِ, Surah 30, verses 17 to 27. It starts with calling us to glorify God, and then it has these 6 verses that are touching again different parts of this beginning and the ending of the sequence, or the chain of creation, dust to humans, and not just individual, but also individual in partnership, in relationship. And the one that was here highlighted was verse 22, where it talks about the creation of the heavens and the earth, and then zooms into the variations in our tongues and colors, the diversity of human languages, human cultures and ethnicities, and yet it seems very, very particular, unique, and yet the one that creates those details and that diversity must be also the one who creates the heavens and the earth. And we talked about sleep and day and night, and fear and hope, and the rain from the skies, and so on. Another thing was Dr. Yamina was reminding us again to stay in that awe, that reverence, that gratitude, and stay in sajda, with that gratitude and awe. And Imam Nursi said there's so many jewels here, but I'm not able to unpack it. So we appreciate that. At least we know that there's so much more to unpack. But for now, I think we got at least the main idea. So with that, inshallah, we can today continue reading from page 412 in words, with a new example of the Quran expressing a lot of things in a very concise way. Who could read from the beginning of this page? Dr. Yamina is here too. Jazakallah khair. Fatu, can you read?
Yeah, I can read, inshallah.
Okay.
Starting with send me, right?
Yes.
Bismillah. Send me, therefore, O Joseph, O man of truth. Send me, therefore, and O Joseph. Are these words Joseph, that I may ask him to interpret the dream? So I sent him, and he went to the prison and said to Joseph, that is to say, although 5 sentences have been abbreviated and summarized in one sentence, it does not mar the clarity or hinder the understanding. Mar is like diminish it, right? Like the same as hinder.
Blemish, maybe.
Blemish? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that example ends there, so we can maybe pause here before we move on to the other. And the Arabic is here. Would you like to read the Arabic too, Fatu?
I can read the English.
Okay, so this is from Surah Yusuf, Surah 12, verse 45 to 46. And Imam Nursi is talking about the kind of jump or move from 45 to 46. استعوذ بالله. وقال الذي نجا منهما وادكر بعد أمة أنا أنبئكم بتأويله فأرسلون.
At that, should I read the translation? Or
yeah.
At that, the one of the 2 erstwhile prisoners who had been saved and who suddenly remembered Joseph after all that time spoke thus, it is I who can inform you of the real meaning of this dream. So let me go in search of it. But the prisoner who had been freed at last remembered Joseph and said, I shall tell you what this means. Give me leave to go.
استعوذ بالله. يوسف أيها الصديق أفتنا في 7 بقرات, and it goes on, but Imam Nursi is just looking at the beginning. Shall we read the whole? Okay, I guess we can read the whole. استعيذ بالله. يوسف أيها الصديق أفتنا في 7 بقرات سمان يأكلهن 7 عجاف و7 سنبلات خضر وأخرى يابسات لعلي أرجع إلى الناس لعلهم يعلمون. You can just read the short one.
Yeah, I was thinking the same. Okay. Truthful Joseph, tell us the meaning of 7 fat cows being eaten by 7 lean ones, 7 green ears of corn, and 7 others withered.
But actually, this is cut off there so that I may return. That part is for some reason cut off. Yeah. Anyhow, but we get the idea, right? I mean, there is this, as you may be familiar with Surah Yusuf, at this point, the king has a dream and then he's asking for an interpretation of it. And the people in his court say, well, we don't know, these are confusing dreams. And this one guy who had been freed from prison, he says, I shall tell you what this means. Let me go. And then the next verse says, Yusuf, truthful one, enlighten us. So between send me and O Yusuf, the next verse, man of truth, there are implicitly these other words, send me therefore so that I can ask him how to interpret the dream. And then, so I was sent. And then, so I sent him and he went to the prison and he asked to Joseph, said to Joseph, and so on. So all that is skipped over. It just starts with, O Yusuf.
I'm a bit confused. Is he saying everything that was mentioned between therefore and O Joseph?
Mhm.
Like have all the details, but it's summarized?
There are no details. So if we look at the end of the verse, فَأَرْسِلُونَ, let me go, send me.
Mm-hmm.
Send me, implicitly send me to Yusuf, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they said, you can go to Yusuf. And then he went to Yusuf. Yusuf, can you please have, all of that is skipped.
Mm.
It says, oh, Yusuf. In the next verses, he's just speaking, Yusuf, ayyuha siddiq, truthful one. Give us, the interpretation of this. He said, let me go. Send me to the prison where Yusuf is so that I can talk to him because he can interpret the dream. All of this in the middle is skipped.
Mm.
And he says that's part of the Quran's eloquence, that it implicitly you can, infer that. It doesn't have to tell you all that. I do think this is eloquent, but I don't know, like, I don't know if it is miraculously eloquent, but I guess it could be one part of it. I I have read some Bible as part of, my studies, and the Bible is not like this at all. It repeats, it gives all the details, and if this person says, like, if the person says, we don't know this dream, the dream is as follows, and then the guy responds, the dream, um, that follows, I will tell to that other person. So like a lot of details are also repeated. I don't recall Yusuf's story in detail, but in many of the stories in the biblical narrative, we often find not only the details, but also the conversation repeated. This is what he said to his father, and then his father said this to the mother, and the thing is repeated. So after the Quran, it had struck me as, strange that why is it repeated, yeah. um,
Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum assalam.
To me, it's not only one, it's it does not talk about things that are superfluous, that we can infer and understand anyways. And that makes it, or makes us focus on what is important. It's like it's zooming. You know, when you are in a theater or something, they have someone, a technician for lights, and they put the light to where they want you to look at, to focus. So here we're not focusing on they went, they came, how many, what, where, what was the name of the place, because that's not the point. So this style is also teaching us what matters. So it's guidance, embodied guidance, like in our life, not to be scattered and, you know, we are told استقم كما أمرت, focus only on here and now, and relate everything to your Rabb, therefore to his beautiful names, to Akhirah. And the Quran embodies that attitude. It does not talk about things that are not, that won't help us. It's like a tarbiyah in action.
That's an excellent point. Yeah. Yeah. Because a lot of the details, of course, it's part of the story, but the Quran, by skipping them, really brings the guidance aspect of it. Yeah. Like we don't get a lot of the details in these, especially narratives, but and the Yusuf, I mean, story of Yusuf alayhi salam is actually the most detailed one, and even that um, has a lot of skipping. But there are a lot of moments where there's emphasis on the message and what the way these are pointing to transcend and connecting us with our Rabb. Same with story of Musa alayhi salam, right? So many details are skipped, and yet there are moments where, you know, Musa alayhi salam's mother, her heart went empty, and you know, um, she was almost going to divulge the secret about the baby. So like it zooms into that mother and her heart, and then, you know, gives assurance, and connecting that to the Rabb, so that everyone's feelings, I mean, there's a guidance in there that, you know, it skips so many details. Musa is running. Where is he running? From where to whom? What? How? That all of that is skipped, and yet there's zooming into that moment where the mother is turning to God, or is in need in her heart with compassion, or the moment where Musa alayhi salam is praying, asking for guidance. That is very kind of explicit, and also again to the point, but explicitly, you know. Yeah, I mean, story of Yusuf, princess in the Bible, the story is very detailed, but God is referred very, like, comparatively much less. Though you know, if you assume it shows up, but it's rare. Whereas in the Quran, the detailed the details, a lot of details are gone, but there is an emphasis on, you know, Yusuf alayhi salam preaching to the prisoners, and we listen to him preach because that is heart of the story. Was somebody going to say something?
I was going to suggest that it also could be the different caliber of language, that the Quran doesn't use a lot of pedestrian, if I may use that term. It's not pedestrian, as in, then we said, then we did this, then we did that, then who so and so came, then so and so left. It's not mundane and doesn't use the everyday language. Some languages have high and low. In German, I think it's known there's high German. It's a different caliber. And as a textual analysis person, I would say, may argue that it ventures more on the abstract than on the concrete, because there is a huge bias in the Western world to stick to the physical and to stick, they call it concrete, even in literature. Concrete language, concrete language, concrete language, as though non-concrete language is vague and meaningless. The Quran is quite the opposite. It may not indulge in details and doesn't necessarily address your so-and-so concrete appetite for info, because maybe it's not about info. It's about meaning, and pushes you to ask. This discomfort space is also useful. Oh, what happened? How did this happen? This doesn't make sense. Even when somebody says this doesn't make sense, all right, then this question begs itself, then what makes sense? If this story doesn't make sense, or if this narration or of these 5 lines don't make sense, then what makes sense? And I think Quran asks us to inquire. وَلْيَتَسَأَلُونَ, to inquire, to be inquisitive, to ask ourselves, even in this uncomfortable space of narration. So maybe that's one aspect of the miraculousness, the abstraction to meaning, not to vagueness. Because some people associate abstraction with vagueness and cliche. And in the West, specifically, love, and cliched notions. No, this is not the direction of the Quran, but it's more into deeper meaning if one cares to push themselves. Now, a lot of people were illiterate receiving the Quran. Were they able to do that? Yes, because they were poetic. Remember, the Quran, of course, it's revealed for everybody, including us right now, but it came from a background where people were very poetically inclined. Poetry is the platform of Arabs. They were poetic people. They understood metaphor. They understood allegory. They understood all of that, and they dealt with it. The problem is in us now, who are not very familiar with that multidimensional language and poetically inclined, perhaps. So the miracle, they always say the miracle was in the expression, how allegoric and poetic and impactful. It wasn't, you might hear a poem now and it doesn't affect you at all. You find it maybe even silly or bogus or something or whatever. But at the time, it did impact people to the degree that they thought it was magic, that somebody was doing sorcery on them. So how come then it's not affecting? I ask myself this question: why does it not affect me this way sometimes? Why do I not find it sorcery? In other words, sorcery meaning so powerful that you think there's somebody's casting a spell on you or something.
Thank you. Jazakallah khair, Maha. That was very helpful for me. I was just typing that abstraction, not for unclarity, not as unclarity or not as cliche, but abstraction to deeper meaning. That was a very insightful way of putting what the Quran is doing, and connects with what Dr. Yamina said as well, that the Quran is focusing us on what matters, and then leaving it open. Maybe not leaving it open, but encouraging us to be curious and inquisitive about the meaning. What deeper meaning is this taking us to? Ziba wrote in the chat, multidimensional, exactly. Very visually stimulating. I guess in reference to the Quran.
It's also multidimensional, not only from the linguistics aspect, but the structure, it's emotional, as Maha was saying, like the poetic beauty. I know, like people who never went to school in Nigeria, in places where there was less, in the south especially, there were less French, and so people still had the Arabic speaking tradition of old days. So people never went to school, but lots of them are poets, men and women, and they still speak with like the metaphors, and they know lots of poetry. And so it's not about going to school or not.
Mm-hmm.
Especially now, you go to school, we are learning, like it's almost technical. Even when you are learning social science, but in a technical way. It's not an education that is all-rounded, because the purpose is different. The purpose of education is not tarbiyah. It's just to train people to fit certain positions.
Yeah, and this point about concreteness also is helpful because there is a part in us gets lost in the concrete details. And there's also a need to know concrete details, but that is for different kinds of discourses, different kinds of narratives. You want to read a well-detailed story, fine, but you find it somewhere else. Go read some literature. Here, the Quran is, as we discussed early on in the beginning of this 25th word, the Quran is here to decipher, the unpack the meaning of reality and connect you to your creator. So, I mean, we should not really get distracted with demand for concreteness.
I think legally, when you want to make a legal case, you want to know all the details and the logic behind it.
Yeah.
And somebody recently wrote, oh, my friend actually, Noha, she's an architect. She recently wrote a post about referring to Surah Al-Baqarah, that people did this and people did that, then they asked this, and the fuss. She said, she was saying in her post, we keep fussing so that we get away from the crux, the core of the issue.
Mm.
And we want to, we've become like modern Zionists. She's talking about Muslims. And I asked her, what do you mean? And she explained to me that even with depression and anxiety, it's about that, getting lost or getting too focused, perhaps, in as though we're making a legal case. So if you're writing a grievance or something, yes, you want details and you want concrete evidence. Or if you're a lawyer arguing a case in the court, absolutely. But other than that, if this is our everyday, then we actually get lost in that, and we become overwhelmed and consumed by minutia, endless minutia that doesn't feed our hunger for meaning and for soulful connection.
Yes, yes. So
Maybe that's also because human being anyways, like there is a tendency to avoid reflection.
Mm.
because of familiarity, because of heedlessness, because of many things. At the end of the day, it's a choice, but there are some reasons. So it's like, to me, it's like, you know, they say if you have only a hammer, everything is a nail. Because we live in a society that is ego-centered, and therefore very much everything is aql, intellect. Actually, it's mostly ego hiding behind the intellect, the so-called. So we use it as the criteria for everything. We want to analyze everything as if we're going to understand. Something, for instance, is making us feel uncomfortable, sad, something. We want to understand it. We start analyzing it, as you said, Maha, as if it's a court case. But like, if the intellect is a ruler, the emotions are like weight or volume. You can't take a ruler and say this is 20 grams or something. But we're not even aware that they are totally different things. Yes, the ruler is very useful, but not when you are weighing something, for instance. And so when it comes to the heart and the soul, and they have needs, and meaning is one of the needs of the soul, we still miss that because it works both ways. Because we are analyzing, and we are over-analyzing because we don't want to deal with those deeper existential questions, because then it brings responsibility, it requires that we question what we are doing, and we don't like it. So it's working both ways. And the real reason, like if we want to break this vicious circle, I feel it's staying with the discomfort and making the decision to see the reality for it is. For instance, the transience of life, because it scares us, then we keep busy with other things and we just bracket it out. But if we are more honest with ourselves, then we'll realize that we cannot analyze everything. Everything is not, actually most of life is not that way. It's not like a legal case. The Quran speaks to the heart, to the ruh, to the imagination, to the emotions. That's why it's very colorful, very powerful, very. I mean, the more you know the language, you will see it clearer. But even if someone doesn't know the language, there is still, like, for instance, it's not linear. That anyone can see that the narrative is not linear, like in the Bible, for instance, as you were saying, Isra. It's even some people called it the ring. What was the name for that? Anyways, some people gave it a name like ring something. But the fact that it's not linear, the fact that wherever you look, it is related to everything else in a very meaningful way. Every surah is related to everything else. It's like a hologram. like the human body. Each cell has the code of the whole body.
Entire DNA. Yeah. I think that's a great connection to the next example, because one verse and there are lots of resonances that Imam Nursi takes from that one verse. So if that's okay with everyone, unless you have a comment or question, inshallah we can move on to this. Who would like to read this verse? This is the verse, maybe we'll read the Arabic first, from Surah Yasin. Actually, maybe toward the very end, Surah 36, verse 80. أعوذ بالله. الذي جعل لكم من الشجر الأخضر نارا فإذا أنتم منه توقدون. He who produces for you fire out of the green tree, so that, lo, you kindle your fires therewith. This is Asad translation. And then the Abdul Halim is, it is he who produces fire for you out of the green tree, lo and behold, and from this you kindle fire. So who could read this explanation here by Imam Nursi?
I'll read, inshallah.
Thank you.
From who produces? And for example, who produces for you fire from the green tree? Here the Qur'an is saying in the face of rebellious man's denials, who is as though challenging the Qur'an by saying, who will raise to life rotten bones? Whoever created them in the first place, he will raise them to life, and that creator knows every single aspect of every single thing. Furthermore, he who produces fire for you from the green tree is able to give life to dry bones. Thus, this sentence looks in numerous ways to the claim that man will raised to life, and proves it. Firstly, with these words, the Qur'an starts off the chain of bounties it lays before man, moves it forward and calls it to mind. Having described it in detail in other verses, it cuts short the description here and refers it to the intelligence. That is, you cannot flee from the one who gives you fruit and fire from trees, sustenance and seeds from plants, cereals and grains from the earth, and makes the earth a fine cradle for you filled with all your sustenance. In the world a palace in which is found all your needs. You cannot be independent of him, or disappear into non-existence and hide there. You cannot enter the grave without duties to sleep in comfort, not to be awoken. Then it points out an evidence of the claim. With the words, the green tree, it implies, O you who deny resurrection, look at the trees. One who raises to life and makes green in spring numberless bone-like trees which have been dead throughout winter, and in every tree even demonstrates 3 examples of resurrection through the leaves, blossoms, and fruit. The power of such a one cannot be challenged through denial or by considering resurrection improbable. Then it points out another evidence, saying, how do you deem it unlikely that one who extracts you out of dense, heavy, dark matter like a tree, subtle, light, luminous manner, like fire should give fire-like life and light-like consciousness to wood-like bones? Then it states another evidence explicitly. It says, one who creates the famous tree which while green produces fire for nomads in a place of matches when two of its branches are rubbed together, and combines two opposites. Like the green and damp and the dry and hot, and makes them the source of the fire, everything, even the fundamental elements, looks to his command and acts through his power. It cannot be considered unlikely of the one who demonstrates that none of these is independent and acts of its own accord, that he should raise up man from the earth once again, who was made from earth and later returned to the earth. He may not be challenged with rebellion. Then, through recalling Moses's, peace be upon him, famous tree, it shows that this claim of Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, is also that of Moses, peace be upon him. Lightly alluding to the consensus of the prophets, it adds one more subtle point to the phrase.
Thank you. So let's come back to the beginning and let's reflect together. If you have any comments or if you want to share anything you understand from this, the first part, please share. I guess we're all familiar with that part of Surah Yasin. This is the very last bit. So there, the context is resurrection, right? Right before this verse, this is verse 80. Right before this, it does refer to human being challenging resurrection and saying, who can give life back to bones after they have decayed? And then the next verse, verse 79 says, say he who created them in the first place will give them life again. He has full knowledge of every act of creation. And then this verse that we're looking at, الذي جعل لكم من الشجر الأخضر نارا. It is he who produces for you fire out of the green tree. So in this reference, a lot of profound meanings are packed. Imam Nursi is saying, this sentence looks in numerous ways to the claim that human being will be raised to life and proves it. How? So then there are like 4 or 5 things he brings up that is implied in this sentence, which acts as an evidence for the claim that the human being is going to be resurrected. And this question, oh, how is rotten bones will be brought back to life, that there is an answer to it. I don't fully understand all of the points, but I can, share the part that I think I understand, and then please let's talk together. So please you also share. Here it says, firstly, with these words, the Quran starts off the chain of bounties, moves it forward, and calls it to mind. İnsana karşı, in the original, insana karşı ettiği silsile-i ihsanatı şu kelamıyla başlar, tahrik eder, hatıra getirir. So, fire from the green tree starts off the chain of bounties, blessings, or silsile could be also translated as sequence of blessings. It starts off, it gives an example, and then you will recall others, which are referred to in detail in other verses. That is, you cannot flee from the one who gives you fruit and fire from trees. So green tree calls to mind the fruit of the tree as well, and then from the tree you think about plants, so many grains and sustenance and cereals being brought from the earth. So then green tree refers to all of that kind of vegetation and plants, and then the fruits and of the trees. All of that is, called into life, is like it starts off a chain reaction. Like by mentioning it, it reminds human being those. And then there was a reference to fire. So makes the earth a fine cradle for you, filled with all your sustenance. Okay, that's also part of the green tree. And the world a palace. But what is the fire? And the world a palace in which is found all your needs. You cannot be independent of him, or disappear into non-existence and hide there. I guess here he's only focusing on the green tree part. الشجر الأخضر نارا. So just شجر أخضر, green tree, can call into mind all of these. It starts off this chain of bounties that we're being fed from the earth, from all these fruits. And okay, there's fire here also. Fire from trees. But a lot of emphasis on sustenance from the plants. Whoever is making this and taking care of you in this way, you cannot be independent of it or disappear into non-existence. I will live, I will die, I'll become nothing, and I'm done. No, you cannot enter the grave without duties to kind of sleep forever, not to be woken up again. So this argument supported with this evidence. Who is making all this green? Green tree. I honestly never thought of it this way. Surah Yasin is so frequently recited. Yeah, I never thought about green tree inviting me to think about all the greenery and all the fruits and sustenance. I used to never understand why does it say green tree? What is that to do with anything? But Imam Nursi, approaching the verse with this understanding that it's coming from the eternal author with all meanings of guidance packed in it. So in green tree, he sees that it starts off a sequence or a chain of bounties. It's nice. Shall we move on to the next one? Next paragraph. Yes, okay. Then it points out an evidence of the claim. With the words the green tree, it implies, O you who deny resurrection, look at the trees. One who raises to life and makes green in spring, numberless bone-like trees, which have been dead throughout winter. And that's a perfect timing for us, at least in the northern hemisphere, experiencing winter, spring. All of these dead-like trees with their dead-like branches, they are being brought to life. And 3 examples of the resurrection. He says, leaves, blossoms, and fruit. So when it says green tree, it also calls to mind things becoming green in the spring, and how that itself is a sample resurrection or multiple resurrections. Leaves are coming out, flowers are coming out, and fruits. And how can you say to the one who makes this happen that you can't bring me back to life? All of that in the green tree. I mean, again, this is also referred to in other verses in the Quran in more detail, this resurrection. So it seems reasonable that it's maybe implied also here. And then it points out another evidence. Would anyone like to share what they understand from this one? Here. How do you deem it unlikely that one who extracts for you out of dense, heavy, dark matter like a tree, subtle, light, luminous manner like fire, should give fire like life and light like consciousness to wood like bones?
Causally, they are unrelated. It's only because we've seen it again and again that we take it for granted. But actually, there is no way, zero way to explain it with what we think makes sense. One is green. It means it's moist, it's tender, and we usually associate fire with dryness.
Yeah, I think that's the next one, I think. And even like with dryness too, right? There is no
Even like the language used, جعل, is جعل. فإذا, suddenly, like it's already when you hear فإذا أنتم منه, it means like unexpected, something magical is happening, you were not expecting it, sudden. فإذا. And جعل is, there is something structural here. It means the shajar, the tree has already been made in a way that is going to be combustible, whether as a tree or as a fossil, like what is it?
oil.
Oil is also from plants and trees. So Ja'ala has already, subhanallah, there is lots of balagha in it.
And again, it connects with resurrection. I mean, the dry branch, if we had never seen,
The first thing that comes to mind is the resurrection, of course. But then there is the, as you said before, the blessings.
and also like this very fact that dry thing is now becoming fire, which is very lively. I mean, if we had never seen before, it would be like impossible to think that from this dry wood something
Yeah,
happen, and then this kind of flames are going to come, light is going to
we
come.
associate it only because we've seen it before. Subhanallah. But actually, yeah, two totally different matters. So he's saying it's like the life and consciousness in this wood-like bones. Like bones are dense matter, but lo and behold, there is life and consciousness. If he can do that, why not?
Mm, mm. So that's another evidence. Resurrection of trees in the spring is an evidence, and this is evidence to dry. This dense dark matter become.
Opposites, like there is contrast to attract our attention.
Mm.
And also the fa'ida, it's the fa there, it gives the impression or the feeling that fire is generated easily. It's an easy consequence, like fa is something is easily coming from it, derived or.
And as you said earlier, there is also a sense of surprise, right? Like because in the translation it says "lo and behold," like oh, lo and behold, you are kindling from this fire,
Subhanallah. And
right?
it's الذي جعل لكم. That lakum is what makes you reflect on the blessings, because this is not just something happening out there. This is happening. It's made for you. So it makes you start thinking and reflecting. I mean, fire in itself is a huge blessing. Or there will be no industry, no, without fire, without no technology, nothing.
Mm. for you. Yeah, maybe specifically for you here is specifically for human beings.
Mhm.
And human beings are the only species of living beings that are actually using fire like this. And then back to the text, it states another evidence explicitly: one who creates the famous tree, which while green produces fire for nomads in place of matches. So there's this type of tree where you rub its branches together and fire comes out, but um, it's a moist, like it's green tree. So bringing fire from the green tree can also be specifically referring to that type of tree from which fire is brought when it's actually green, not even dry. I mean, dry and fire is also striking. We just stop noticing it, as Dr. Yamina was saying. And then there's also this type that is not even dry, and still fire is brought. So that could be also intended in this verse.
In the tafsirs, they al-markh. One of them is al-markh. And the other one al-ghafar, I think. So two green, moist trees. And Allahu alam, I don't know.
Yeah. So basically, again, it comes back to this, that how can you think it's unlikely that the one who's creating this cannot bring you back to life after death? How can you just disappear, exist and disappear? And then this last part was surprising to me. I had never thought of it in relation to Musa alayhi salam, the burning bush. So it also has a subtle reference to the burning bush of Musa alayhi salam, where he goes by the burning bush and then he hears the divine voice. So when it says brings you fire from a green tree, it also implicitly alludes to that. And again, saying that Muhammad alayhi salam is in the same line with Musa alayhi salam. All the prophets are talking about this one God and resurrection. So it adds one more subtle point to the phrase. This is very comprehensive. It's just a phrase. الذي جعل لكم من الشجر الأخضر نارا الذي جعل لكم من الشجر الأخضر نارا. The one who produces for you fire from the green tree. With this one sentence, reminds us of the bounties and the amazing phenomenon of fire from the green tree, and to the burning bush of Musa alayhi salam, connecting him with the last prophet Muhammad alayhi salam. All of that is indicated, and the evidence for resurrection is brought forth in different ways.
Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam.
This ayah of the green tree and the fire is reminiscent. It brings up an awe for me that is reminiscent of in learning the names of Allah, like the initial kind of confusion coming from that place of concrete thinking of names that are seemingly, opposites or contrasting. And the same here, if we look at it only in a concrete manner, that how would if we didn't know, right, that we make fire from trees, that, how do this moist thing have to do with this dry, hot thing? And same with, like, for example, just like al-qabid and al-basit. But then, subhanAllah, like, if we take that moment, like Musa alayhi salam did, to actually consider, like, I'll say in my own experience, right, when I first, alhamdulillah for these halaqats over time, coming to, instead of just like question and resist the opposition, like the opposites in Allah's names, in a moment, like just trying to stick with that and see how in an experience I'm having, how they are both true in that same moment, and actually staying with that really does bring about the reality that, yes, indeed, they are both. And I would imagine that probably all of his attributes are true in every moment. But because of staying with that and being open to a truth beyond my concrete understanding, I was given that deeper, I suppose, understanding that's not intellectual. And that reminds me of what Imam Nursi is doing here by adding Musa's experience with the burning bush, because he stayed there. And by staying there, he received more insight. He received revelation. He spoke to God, subhanAllah. So I guess I'm just seeing a parallel here, subhanAllah, in these pieces, how he's connecting them, and then subhanAllah, like in my own experience.
Thank you, Salam. So that also connects with what was said earlier about staying with this discomfort. I hear you saying that staying with the puzzlement, right? We're puzzled. You were puzzled with like how these names are opposite to each other, or Musa alayhi salam was puzzled. How is this tree not, like burning like this? Like how is this?
Yeah.
If we stay there, then we are granted deeper insight. And it can perhaps apply here as well, because there's a way of reading where we just read through. I have always read green tree, and it's a green. Why green tree? I mean, what is? And I moved on. But here, Imam Nursi paused with it. Like, why does it say green tree? And then a sign of miraculousness of the Quran comes in. The green, because it's highlighting life, and thereby becomes an evidence for resurrection, and so on. It's also blessings, like green brings to mind all the vegetation which we are fed with. So it's
It also makes me think of, like, you might even think that when a tree is dry and looks dead, like when like a grapevine is in its dormant state, it looks so brittle and dry. Like there might be a way you could believe that would be dry enough to like catch fire, but it's so contradictory to think of like the green, lush, wet plants to reach that oppositional state. My nephew is like he's an outdoorsman, And he taught me and my children how to start a fire last summer. And when he said, now we need to look for sticks, I started looking and trying to find very dry ones. And he took his axe and started chopping branches off of some of the trees, you know, parts of them that were like. And I was surprised, subhanAllah. And he said, you don't need dry branches to make a fire. You need to use them in the right way. And subhanAllah, I thought that was amazing and a clearly an ayah in action of this, subhanAllah.
Thank you for sharing. Anyone else? If not, then we can, I think, stop here for tonight. Instead of starting a new section, we can leave here and we'll start with fourth glow next week, inshallah. Okay. And Dr. Yamina, would you please say a closing dua for us?
نستغفر الله نستغفر الله نستغفر الله العظيم الكريم الرحيم الذي لا إله إلا هو الحي القيوم ونتوب إليه سبحانه. ربي أعني على ذكرك وشكرك وحسن عبادتك. اللهم بحق السر المكنون في كن فيكون نسألك أن تقضي حوائجنا وتيسر أمورنا وتتمم لنا مصالحنا. كافها يا عين صاد حاميم عين سين قاف سيكفيكهم الله. اللهم أنت ربي لا إله إلا أنت، خلقتني وأنا عبدك وأنا على عهدك ووعدك ما استطعت. أعوذ بك من شر ما صنعت. أبوء لك بنعمتك علي وأبوء لك بذنبي فاغفر لي فإنه لا يغفر الذنوب إلا أنت. اللهم إنا نجعلك في نحورهم ونعوذ بك من شرورهم. اللهم إنا نجعلك في نحورهم ونعوذ بك من شرورهم. اللهم إنا نجعلك في نحورهم ونعوذ بك من شرورهم. اللهم شتت شملهم وفرق جمعهم ومزقهم كل ممزق. اللهم اجعل بأسهم بينهم لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله. اللهم نكس رايتهم. اللهم اجعل غزة مقبرة الغزاة. اللهم اجعل تدبيرهم تدميرهم. اللهم لا ترفع لهم راية ولا تحقق لهم غاية. اللهم مزق كيانهم. اللهم أرنا فيهم عجائب قدرتك. آمين والحمد لله رب العالمين. فالله خير حافظا وهو أرحم الراحمين. حسبنا الله ونعم الوكيل. حسبنا الله سيأتينا الله من فضله ورسوله. إنا إلى الله راغبون. ربي إني مسني الضر وأنت أرحم الراحمين. لا إله إلا أنت سبحانك إني كنت من الظالمين. آمين والحمد لله رب العالمين. والصلاة والسلام على سيد المرسلين وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين.
Ameen, Ameen. Jazakumullah khair, Dr. Yamina. Jazakumullah khair, everyone. Inshallah, see you next week.